All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're digging into a story that kicks off with something so simple you would never in a million years guess the cosmic horror it uncovers. It all starts with a walk in the woods and one single misstep that changes literally everything. You know that old saying, right? For want of a nail, the kingdom was lost. It's a perfect way to describe the butterfly effect. How one tiny, almost random event can set off this massive chain reaction. Well, for the quiet little town of Haven, Maine, that nail is about to come loose, and with it, the whole kingdom. It all starts with a fateful stumble. Seriously, a quiet afternoon walk that somehow becomes the very beginning of a terrifying obsession. So let me introduce you to Bobby Anderson. She's a writer living a pretty quiet, isolated life out in Haven, Maine. Her main companion? Her old dog Peter, who was actually a gift from her friend Jim Gardner. Now that's a name you're going to want to remember. Look, this isn't some grand adventure she's on. It's the first day of summer, and Bobby is just wandering around her own property, looking for trees to mark for firewood. It is completely routine, totally normal, the kind of day where absolutely nothing is supposed to happen. And this is the moment. This is where it all changes. She's following her dog Peter, veers just a little off her usual path. Her boot catches on something hard, something hidden just under the leaves, and she goes sprawling. A simple accident, right? But what she tripped on is anything but simple. So she's curious. She brushes away the dirt and realizes it's not a rock, it's not a root. It's this piece of dull gray metal. She tries to wiggle it, but it's completely immovable, like it's part of the bedrock. And then, when she touches it, she feels this faint, totally bizarre vibration, almost like a tuning fork coming deep inside the earth. It's gone in a flash, but that feeling lingers. Okay, so that little discovery, it almost immediately starts to exert this strange, powerful influence on everything around it. And this is where things get really weird. That initial curiosity, it morphs into something else entirely and fast. It's not even a choice anymore. It becomes this powerful physical need. She has to know what this thing is. The compulsion to dig just takes over, pushing aside her writing, her chores, everything. And here's where we get our parallel story. Miles and miles away, on a poetry reading tour, Bobby's old friend and one-time lover, Jim Gardner, gets hit with a craving of his own. Now, Jim's a recovering alcoholic, but this urge, it feels different. It's a physical, all-consuming need for a drink, and it is about to send him right off a cliff. So you have to wonder, right? Are these two things connected? You've got Bobby being pulled in by this strange object in the ground, while Jim is being dragged back into the abyss of his own addiction. What we're seeing are two people on the verge of being completely consumed, one by a potential alien force, and the other by a deeply, deeply human one. And get this, Bobby's dog, Peter, becomes the first living sign that something is profoundly wrong. The old boy starts acting younger, he's more coordinated, and the cataract in his eye actually starts to heal. But it's not all good. He gets really aggressive. And then one night during a thunderstorm, Bobby sees this faint, eerie green light just glowing from that very same eye. The strangeness just keeps ramping up. After her first big digging session, Bobby passes out and sleeps for 12 hours straight, which is unheard of for her. She also realizes her period, which had just started, has just stopped. Then, in the woods around the object, she finds dead animals, birds, a groundhog, with no signs of injury at all. But here's the detail that'll make your skin crawl. The bodies are decaying, but there are no flies. Not a single one. It's like the basic laws of nature are being rewritten. So while Bobby is unearthing this physical mystery, Jim Gardner is busy digging up his own demons. And believe me, his fall is just as terrifying. Jim's downward spiral is brutally fast. That intense craving leads to the first drink. That first drink leads to a blackout. He wakes up fully clothed in a cold bathtub with only bits and pieces of memory, like getting into a violent argument about nuclear power. This kicks off a bender that goes on for days, and it ends with him on a beach in New Hampshire, beaten up, broke, and ready to just end it all. But even in this drunken, suicidal haze, something manages to break through. A weird line from an old nursery rhyme gets stuck in his head. Tommy knockers, knocking at the door. And with that line comes this terrifying certainty. Bobby is in serious, serious trouble. Meanwhile, back in Haven, Bobby has been digging and digging and digging. She's about to connect the dots, and she's going to arrive at a conclusion that just defies all logic. As she clears more and more of the earth away, she realizes the edge she's uncovered isn't straight. It has this subtle but perfectly uniform curve. So this isn't the corner of a box or some buried metal plate. No, it's part of something circular, something enormous. She stumbles back to her farmhouse totally exhausted and sketches the arc of the object. She's a writer, not an artist, but she gets the curve down on a piece of paper as accurately as she possibly can. Then she grabs a simple little compass from her desk, extends the arc she drew into a full circle, and does the math. The result is just mind-blowing. The object buried in her backyard has a circumference of roughly 300 meters. That's nearly 1,000 feet around. Just think about that for a second. What on earth, buried in the woods, could be that massive? A forgotten silo? Some huge piece of old machinery? Nothing makes sense. The scale is just, it's impossible. And that's when the only answer left, no matter how completely insane it sounds, is the one she lands on. She actually says the words out loud just to hear how they sound in the real world. The thing in her woods, the thing that's changing her dog and warping reality around it, is a buried spaceship. So this leaves our two main characters at their absolute lowest points, driven by forces they just can't understand, and now they're on an inevitable collision course. You can see these two horrifying journeys happening side by side. Bobby, under the influence of this alien thing, she feels empowered. But is she even Bobby anymore? And then you have Jim, totally wrecked by his addiction, but a strange premonition has given him this one last, desperate purpose: find Bobby. And that is the question we're left with, isn't it? One of them is becoming something, more than human, but at the same time, less than herself. The other is at the absolute rock bottom of his own humanity. So what happens when a suicidal drunk with a strange premonition shows up at the door of a woman who is unearthing an alien ship? What in the world could possibly happen next?